Masechet Shevuot, Daf Yod Zayin. The Mishnah mentioned the law that if someone enters into the temple courtyard while tahor, and then while there, something happens and they became tameh, the law is that they must immediately go to the nearest exit and leave. If they do that, then they will not be liable to anything. What could they do? They became tameh by accident, not on purpose. So if they leave right away, they're totally fine. However, if they stay there, they wait the amount of time it would take to bow down, or if he exits through a far exit, not the closest exit, if he does any of those things by mistake, meaning he didn't realize that he has to leave right away, then he has to bring a korban, ole v'yored. That is the basic law. Now we're going to ask a few follow-up questions about interesting subcases that are varieties of this situation. Ba'erava, sarich shehiyah lemalkot or en sarich shehiyah lemalkot. So far we were talking about someone who became tameh by mistake, and he stayed there the amount of time it would take to bow down. Let's say that's 10 seconds. The Gemara said it's the same amount of time to say half a pasuk that we quoted from Divrei Yamim. So he's supposed to leave right away. If, by mistake, he didn't realize that he has to leave right away, and he stays there for 10 seconds, or he goes to a farther exit, then he has to bring korban or levi yored. But what if he knows, and someone is witnesses there, and they say, listen, you better leave right now, or else you're going to get lashes. And he says, I'm going to stay here anyway. So he became tameh by mistake, but he tarried there on purpose. Now, what's the law regarding malkot? Rava asked by Rava, sarich shehiyah lemalkot? Do we need the minimal amount of time of waiting, of tarrying there in order to get lashes? Or en sarich shehiyah lemalkot? Or do you get malkot immediately, even if you didn't wait all 10 seconds? Someone said, you better leave now, and you didn't leave. You waited 2 seconds. You already get malkut even after 2 seconds, or only after 10 seconds? That's the question. Here's the two sides. Lekorban gemire shehiyah, lemalkot la gemire shehiyah. This whole law is based on an oral tradition. So, does this oral tradition apply only to a korban? When you stay there by mistake, I didn't know, and I stuck around there, and then I realized after, and I learned the law after, then you have to bring korban. So, the leniency regarding tarrying, that you only have to bring korban if you stayed there for 10 seconds, or if you actually bowed, or if you went a long way, that's a leniency only for bringing a korban. However, if someone said you better leave, and you didn't leave immediately, then one gets lashes, and because the oral tradition regarding tarrying does not apply to lashes. That's one side of the question. Or dilma bifnim gemiri shehiyah lashena lekorban velashena lemalkot teku. Or maybe the tradition that one is only liable if one tarries there for 10 seconds, that applies to anyone within the temple, bifnim, within the temple courtyard. And it makes no difference whether he is tarrying by mistake and would have to bring korban, or he tarries on purpose and therefore gets malkot. In either way, either punishment requires that one tarry there for 10 seconds. If he tarried there for less than 10 seconds, then by mistake, he would not bring korban. On purpose, he would not get malkot. That's the two sides of the question, and we leave it open-ended. Ba'erava, tala atzmo ba'avir azara mahu. Next question, Rava asks, what if someone is suspended? Let's say there's a crane, and he's suspended from a crane into the airspace of the temple courtyard, but he's not standing on the ground. So he's technically within the courtyard, but not standing in the courtyard, and he's there becomes tameh there, and he waits around. What's the law? Ki gemiri shehiyah shehiyah debat teshtachava'a delabat teshtachava'a la gemiri. One side of the dilemma is maybe when we learn the oral tradition that one is liable when one stays there for the amount of time it would take to bow down. That means waiting there where one has the possibility of bowing down, meaning when one is standing on the floor. If you're standing on the floor where you could easily just bend down and then you'd be prostrating, then whether you're prostrate or not, if you wait there the amount of time of 10 seconds, I'm assuming 10 seconds is the amount of time it takes to prostrate, where we could time it later. then one is liable. But if one is not standing on the ground, there's no possibility of prostrating on the ground. If you're hanging from a rope, then one would not be liable, no matter how long. So if you feel like it, if you really want to go into an area that you're not allowed, just hang from a crane, and then you could stay there. That's one side. Or dilma bifnim shehiya gemiri lashana debatishtachav lashana de la batishtachav teku. Or perhaps the oral tradition that one is liable if one waited there is regarding bifnim, within the temple courtyard area. And it makes no difference whether he is in a position standing on the ground that he could prostrate, or if he's hanging from the air and he couldn't possibly prostrate. The point is, he's in the area for 10 seconds, and then you'd have to bring a korban. We leave this unanswered. Rav Ashi asks, what if a person who's tahor enters the temple courtyard and then purposefully makes himself tameh? What is the law regarding that person? Maybe this leniency that he doesn't have to bring korban olev yored until he stays there for 10 seconds, that's only if he became tameh by mistake, and then he stayed there by mistake. Okay, only if you stayed there 10 seconds, you have to bring korban, otherwise you don't have to bring anything. But maybe if he made himself tameh on purpose, and then he stayed there even for 2 seconds, even for 1 second, he has to bring a korban. There's no leniency of only if you tarry there, because you made yourself tameh on purpose. So then one would have to bring, well, the idea here is that he would have to bring a korban because he tarried there at all, even for 1 second. So that's why he would have to bring korban. But that was by mistake. He didn't realize he has to leave immediately, but he stayed there for 2 seconds instead of 0 seconds. So we have to bring a korban, but he doesn't get the leniency of the whole 10 seconds. Or do we say that the tradition is regarding being inside the courtyard, and it makes no difference whether he became tameh by mistake or became tameh on purpose. Even though he became tameh on purpose, but then he didn't know the law that he has to leave right away. He had no idea. He thought he could wait around and leave later. But it's not true. He has to leave. He has 10 seconds to leave. If he leaves before 10 seconds, even that person does not have to bring a korban. Otherwise, he does have to bring korban. And we leave this question also unanswered. Nazir bekever. What if a Nazir who's prohibited from entering into a cemetery, let's say somehow he finds himself in the cemetery, he wandered in there by mistake or whatever, and now he's in there, he realizes. So he's supposed to leave right away. But here's the question. How long does he have to leave? In 1 second? Or does he have 10 seconds to leave before he would be liable? So does he need, this is to get lashes, if he's staying there on purpose. So does he get lashes immediately or only after staying there for 10 seconds? Bifnim gimiri shehiyah, bachutz la gimiri shehiyah. Here's the two sides. Do we learn the law of waiting? That's in the temple courtyard. That's where you have 10 seconds to leave or else. But bachutz, meaning outside the temple courtyard, in a cemetery for a Nazir, that there's no oral tradition about that. So if he stays there for any amount longer than immediately, then he will get malkut. Or maybe there's no difference. We learned that if someone enters by mistake, then he has 10 seconds to leave. And it makes no difference whether it's in the courtyard, where someone tameh is in the courtyard, he's not allowed to be, or someone like a Nazir who's in the cemetery, where he's not allowed to be. Either way, if he got there by mistake, then he has 10 seconds to leave, or else he will get the appropriate punishment. Teko, this is also left, the question is left standing. Ba'alo ba'aru ka chayav, biksara patur. The next part of the Mishnah taught that if someone entered into the temple courtyard, tahor, he became tameh. Good, now he's going to leave. If he leaves the long way, he is liable. If he leaves the short way, he is not liable to bring a korban. Amar Rava, kesara shamru afilu akeh besad gudal, ve'afilu kol hayom kulo. Rava says a big chidush. As long as he goes the short way out to the nearest exit, even if he goes very slowly, that's okay. Even if he puts 1 foot, he puts his his right foot at his right ankle at the toes of his left foot, and then he puts his left ankle at the toes of the right. I mean, he takes tiny steps, the smallest possible steps, and he goes very slowly. And it takes him all day long. It takes him 10 hours to get to the nearest exit. That's okay, because he's moving. He's going the whole time, and he's not waiting at any one spot for 10 seconds. That's okay. He is patur. You don't have to run. You could walk as long as you're constantly walking. It's like the game. So your brother says, "Get out of my room," and then you go very slowly. I'm going, right? I'm listening to what you say. Okay, doesn't usually work out well. Rava, Shevuot mahu sheyistarafu. Now Rava asked the question himself. He just said this law, and now he asks a related question. These moments of tarrying, do they join together? I understand if I'm in one spot and I wait 10 seconds, I'm assuming 10 seconds again, is the amount of tarrying, the amount of time it would take to prostrate. So if I'm in one spot, I wait 10 seconds, then I'm going to have to bring a korban. But what if I don't do that? I wait in one place for 3 seconds. Then I take a step, I wait there for 3 seconds. Take another step, wait there for 3 seconds. Take another step, wait there for 3 seconds. Altogether, it amounts to more than 10 seconds. So do I add them all up? Or as long as each stopping point is less than 10, it's okay. And I can wait 9 seconds, just move, wait another 9 seconds, and that would be okay. That's his question. We say to Rava, "V'tifshot le'midideh." Why doesn't he learn the answer from what he just said? Rava just said you can go as slowly as possible. Therefore, it sounds like you do not combine moments of tarrying. You could wait in each spot and as long as each one is less than 10. So doesn't his halacha that he said earlier answer his own question? Answer is no, it does not answer it, because hatam b'delashaha. When he said you can go really slowly, that means but you're moving all the time. You're constantly moving one foot and putting it in front of the other. You're never stopping at all. Since you're never stopping, you could go very slow like a snail, but you're moving. So that's not called tarrying. But his question was, what if you take one step and wait for 5 seconds? Take one step, wait for 5 seconds. Is that okay? That he doesn't know. Abaye asks a question from Rabba. Okay, guy's in the middle somewhere in the Temple Mount, and there's a close exit that's 20 seconds away. There's a far exit that's 30 seconds away. Okay, so he has to go to the short exit that's 20 seconds away. We understand. But what if he goes to the far exit, but he runs very fast? And instead of taking 30 seconds for a normal pace, he goes fast and gets to the far exit in less than 20 seconds, less than the amount of time, or equal to the amount of time that it would take to get to the close exit. What do you say about that? Shiur gemire v'chi ba lo ba'aruka shiur kesara patur. Is it the fixed amount of time? We say, well, let's see, you're 20 seconds from the closed exit, so you have to leave within 20 seconds. However you get out is up to you. You can run to the faraway exit, but you have 20 seconds, the amount of time it would take to go to the closest. And in that case, if he ran quickly to the far exit, he'd be fine. Or do we say, when we say you have to leave to the closest exit, we mean davka, in particular, specifically the short exit. And no matter how fast you run to the far exit, it's not about the fixed time, it's about the distance. And you went a longer distance unnecessarily, and you would be liable even if you ran fast. That's the two sides of the question. And Rabbah has an answer. The law regarding the longer way was not given so that it can be overridden for a guy who goes fast. When the Mishnah says, don't go with the long exit, it means it. Davka, don't go to the long exit, even if you go fast. Otherwise, why would you say, oh, don't go long exit, but if you go fast, then you can? No, this is not something that can be overridden by going fast. So it's the distance that counts, not the time. Matkif la Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera is going to argue against Rabbah's answer from the following law. There is a law that says that a kohen who is tameh, who served in the Bet HaMikdash, he did some service, like he slaughtered an animal, or he carried the blood to the altar, or he sprinkled it on the altar. If he does does any of these things while tameh, his punishment is mita bideh shamayim. That's the law. Now, this law, how could it ever happen? Hechi mashkachat la. Idela shaha hechi abid avodah. He's tameh, right? Now, if he's tameh and just in the temple courtyard for any longer than 10 seconds, then he's going to be chayav karet. And karet is more serious than mita bideh shamayim. So how can we come up with a scenario in which he will be liable to only mita bideh shamayim and not karet? Meaning, how could he serve, do a service in the Bet HaMikdash without waiting there the amount of time it would take to do a hishtachava, which is a pretty short time. So here's the sides. If he didn't wait there, now he was there for less than 10 seconds, what kind of avodah can you do in such a short time? You can do shechita. It takes some time, right? You can't do it in such a short time. If he did wait there at least 10 seconds, then he gets karet. And karet is more stringent than mita bideh shamayim. So you don't have to tell me mita bideh shamayim. So it can't be that either. Now, if you say, regarding this question that Abaye asked, that we follow the amount of time. It's a fixed amount of time, and if you run fast and you get to the far exit within that 20 seconds that would take to get to the short one, you're fine. Then we can come up with a scenario that would fit this law, and you'd get only mita bideh shamayim and not karet. How so? Let's say he runs really fast. So let's say the shortest exit is 20 seconds, and the time of waiting is 10 seconds. So he has 30 seconds altogether. If he gets in, let's say he goes really fast, and it takes him only 5 seconds to get to the spot where he has to be, and he quickly takes some blood and sprinkles it on the altar, and that only takes less than 20 seconds. And then he runs really fast, 5 seconds out. He's able to do the whole thing in less than 30 seconds. Well, in that case, he would not be liable karet because he did not stay the amount of time necessary. It's shi'ura. It's the amount of time to get to the shortest exit, but he was there less than that time, and less than the time of getting to the shortest exit, less than the time of tarrying, and that therefore he would not be liable for being in the courtyard because there to short time, but it was enough time because he really rushed. He ran in, that it was enough time to do a temple service, and that's why he's chayav mita bideh shamayim. So you see, this is all Rabbi Zera arguing the opposite answer, not what Rabbah answered. Right? So then you have a case. But if Rabbi Zera is saying, if you say Rabbah, that it means precisely you have to go the short route, and you can't go the long route, it's about the distance and not about the time, then how would you ever have a case where you'd be liable to mita bideh shamayim only and not karet? That's his question. Amar Abaye, my kushya. Abaye says, what kind of question is that? We have a case. Mashkach ada kigon, sheba bakesara, ve'afach besinora, uchde Rav Huna. Damar Rav Huna, zar shafach besinora, chayav mita. You can have such a case where someone came into the short distance and he took a pitchfork like this, a sinora, a fork, and while he was, running fast, he took this fork on the Mizbeach, and he flipped over one of the burgers. He flipped over one of the pieces of a korban, and thereby he made it burn faster. And putting the korban on the Mizbeach and helping it burn, that's one of the avodah according to Rav Huna. Because Rav Huna says that a non-kohen who takes a fork and flips over, moves around some meat that's on the Mizbeach is liable to death. So he's considering that something that you'd get the death, the mita bideh shamayim, even though it's not one of the official 4 avodot, but this by itself, if a zar does it, or if a tameh does it, a kohen who's tameh, would be chayav mita. And this only takes 1 second to do. So as long as he goes in the shortest way, and he's running fast, and he flips it over, which is less than the time it would take to tarry, to do hishtachavaya and runs out, he would not be liable for remaining in the Bet HaMikdash. So he'd not be liable to cut it, but he would be liable to Bita B'dei Shamayim. And we could therefore maintain Rabba's answer to Abaye that it's that you have to go the shortest route. It's about the distance, not about the time. And so fine, this is the distance. He went the shortest route, and still this is an easy avodah that one can do there. And therefore, Abaye was able to defend Rabba's answer. Good. Gufa. Now that you mentioned this interesting halacha, let's analyze it further. Amar Rav Huna, Zar she'afach besinora chayav mita. If a non-Kohen moves with his pitchfork some piece of meat on the mizbeach, he is liable to the death penalty bidei shamayim. Hechidameh. What's the case? Id lahafach la mi'akele peshita. If it was such a case where, had he not moved it, it would not be consumed. It was in an area that wasn't hot, and it would have been left there for a long time and never would have burnt up, then obviously he would be liable, because by moving it, he put it on the hot part, and because of that action, now it's being consumed. So obviously he would be liable for doing that if he's not a Kohen. Non-Kohen can't do that. And if it was on the spot, on the Mizbeach, where it would have been consumed anyway, even had he not moved it. It was already on a hot part of the fire. So then what did he do? He just moved it over, but it was going to be consumed anyway. So then he didn't do any action. Why should this non-Kohen be liable when he just went up there and did a meaningless action? That's the question challenged to Rav Huna. We're talking about a case where, had he not moved this piece of meat, it would have been consumed after 2 hours. But now that he moved it, it will be consumed in 1 hour. So he made it get consumed faster. So that's what he's teaching us. He teaches us that as long as you're accelerating the service, that's also called a valid service. And if he's a non-Kohen who does it, then they will get mita b'dei shamayim. Amar Rabbi Oshaya, ba'ina de'ema mileta mistafena mechabraya. Rabbi Oshaya says, I want to say a halacha, but I'm afraid of my colleagues that they're going to make fun of me, give an objection, and say that I'm wrong. And so it's scary. You want to say something, but you don't want everybody to say that that's wrong. So here's the halacha that he was afraid to say. He didn't have to be afraid, because it turns out he had good support. הנכנס לבית המנוגה דרך אחוריו, ואפילו כולו חוץ מחותמו טהור. דכתיב, והבא אל הבית דרך ביה אסרה תורה. If someone enters a leprous house that has some mold, that was declared to be a leprous house, and therefore anything inside, all the furniture, anything inside, any person inside, becomes tameh just by being in there. Similar to tumat ohel. But this is regarding nega sara'at. But let's say someone is tahor, he's outside of the house, and he enters into the house backwards. And as long as some part of his body is still outside, even his nose, your nose sticks out a little, so his whole body is walking backwards into the house, his whole body is inside, except just his nose is sticking out, he will be tahor. Why would you think that? Because the pasuk says, Haba el habayit, someone who enters into the house. Entering means in the normal way that one enters the house. Usually, when you go into a house, you go face first. So if you go back first, then it's not really called entering into the house. And since your nose is sticking out, you're not totally in the house. So that's what it seems to be. It makes sense. Now, it is an unusual law to teach, and you can see why he would be afraid to teach this, because people make fun of him. Well, what kind of crazy law is that? So, mistafena mechavraya, this is why he was afraid to teach this to his colleagues. If so, maybe if he enters totally, even also his nose, maybe he'll say, look, he never entered into the house in the normal way, so therefore, even if he enters all the way backwards, he never technically entered the house. even though he's in the house. So you have a kind of a paradox. How could it be in the house if he never entered the house? Well, he never entered the house face first, and you're only tameh face first. You go backwards, then you're tahor. And that seems wrong to me. So the Hoshaya says, this seems like this would be a logical consequence, but how about if he all goes in? If his nose is sticking out, that makes sense. He's not in it, and he didn't enter. But if he's all the way in, but he went backwards, so should he be tahor? This was what I was afraid to ask to bring up this halacha. Amar Rava kulo lo gara mikelim shebabayit tichtiv velo yitma kol asher babayit. Rava says, no, I have an answer for you. If he entirely enters in, then he certainly will be tameh. It's not any worse, any less than the vessels that are in the house. And regarding all the vessels in the house, it says, make sure that take out all the vessels in the house before the Kohen declares the house to be tameh, so that they don't become tameh. Meaning, if you leave it in the house, then anything in the house does become tameh. Even though it didn't enter the house, you didn't bring it into the front door, it was already there. So we learned from this that anything that's in a house and in a bait minugah is tameh. So if a person enters backwards, okay, great, you entered backwards, you didn't enter in the normal way, but now if you're entirely in the house, then that you become tameh because you're entirely in the house. But Rabbi Yosha is still correct regarding this diuk, that if he goes backwards, then as long as one part of his body is outside, he's not totally in the house, so this law wouldn't apply, and he didn't enter in the normal way, so this law wouldn't apply, so he can go backwards as long as some part of him is outside. Tanyana mehachi, and we have a braita that proves that this is true, because it says, Gagin halalu, and ochlin sham kodshe kodashim, ve'en shochatim sham kodashim kalim, ve'tameh shenichnas derech gagin lahechal, patur, shneimar, ve'lemikdash lo tavo, derech bi'ah, asrat Torah. The rooftops of the chambers of the temple courtyard. Around the temple courtyard, there were various covered chambers. Now, anywhere in the courtyard has the status of Kedusha, and therefore you can eat, the Kohanim can eat Kodshe Kodashim there, like Chatat, and one can do slaughter animals there. However, that applies to the floor, but the rooftops, even though they're technically in the airspace of the temple courtyard, they do not have the status of holiness. One cannot eat Kodshe Kodashim there. One cannot slaughter animals there, not even Kadashim Kalim, like a Korban Shelamim. If someone who is Tameh goes on the roof of the Hechal, Patur, the roof of the Hechal is very, very holy. Only Kohanim can go, you have to be Tahor and all there. But the rooftop, that is not holy. As the Pasuk says, El HaMikdash Lo Tabo, do not enter into the Mikdash, and Lo Tavo, enter means the normal way of entering. That's what's prohibited. But if you're on the roof, even if you would come from the roof, that's not a normal way of entering. And therefore, that's not called entering into the courtyard if you only enter on top of the roof. So, if we apply the same principle, it's the same midrash. Entering into a space is only considered legally entering if you enter a normal way, through the door, frontwards. But if you enter a funny way, if you enter on the roof, if you enter backwards, then that's not called entering. And so you see that this Baraita supports Rabbi Oshaya's ruling. The next part of the Mishnah taught, Zohi misvat aseh shebamikdash she'en hayavin aleha. The Mishnah continued and taught that this mitzvah regarding tarrying in the Beit HaMikdash area if one is tameh is a mitzvat aseh that has to do with impurity in the Mikdash, for which the Sanhedrin would not be liable to bring a parchatat if the Sanhedrin made a mistaken ruling about it. Now, the Gemara is puzzled by this part of the Mishnah. What do you mean, Zohi? This is the mitzvat aseh. This, what are you pointing to? Hecha ka'eh. What is your context in which you are saying this is the mitzvah, as if you were dealing with some kind of case and looking for a mitzvah like this? Tekamar zohi. Right? What was the context of your discussion that you're saying this is what we were looking for? And the answer is hatam ka'eh and chayavin alaseh v'alot taseh sheba mikdash. Oh, the context is a Mishnah in Masechet Horayot. Masechet Horayot is all about mistaken mistaken rulings by the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin says something, this is allowed, even though it's not allowed. They made a mistake, and then people followed the Sanhedrin. Then, instead of the people bringing their own individual korban chatat for sinning by mistake, it's actually the Sanhedrin that has to bring a par chatat because they are responsible for making this ruling in error. And regarding that, Mishnah Masechet Horayot says that the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin, is not liable regarding a case of an aseh and a case of a lo ta'aseh that has to do with impurity in the mikdash. But it doesn't elaborate on what the case is. So here, in our Mishnah, Masechet Shevuot, it says, this is the case that we're talking about when we said, there's mitzvah ta'aseh in the mikdash, it's that you have to leave, you have 10 seconds to leave, and you have to go by the shortest way. As long as you go within that time, you don't have to bring korban oleh v'yored. Let's say a Sanhedrin gives a mistaken ruling about it and says something different, then the Sanhedrin does not bring a korban. Now the Mishnah there continued, and the continuation will give some of the reason why. A person generally that makes a sin for which one would have to bring a korban hatat kevu'ah, meaning just a regular animal, not an olev yored, not a sliding scale if you're richer animal, if you're poorer than a bird, or a grain offering, but a regular korban hatat. For example, there's two pieces of fat. One is kosher, one is chelev. And he ate one of them, and he doesn't know which one he ate. So he's not sure. He can't bring a regular korban chatat because he doesn't know if he sinned or not. That person brings an asham talui. That's what an asham talui is for. So talui, it will, just in case, it will be a provisional guilt offering. If one day he figures out that he really did eat the wrong one, then he'll bring a korban chatat kevu'ah. The law is, one does not bring an asham talui regarding an aseh or lo ta'aseh that has to do with impurity in the Bet HaMikdash. Because for a case of impurity in the Bet HaMikdash, one brings a korban oleh v'yored, a sliding scale. And one does not bring, and let's say you're not sure. I'm not sure if I was tameh, I'm not sure if I stayed there that long. Then you don't bring a korban oleh v'yored because you're not sure. You only bring korban oleh v'yored if you're sure afterwards that you in fact sinned. And you don't bring a korban a sham talui either. So all these are based on the same thing. One only brings a sham talui if one would have to bring a chatat kevu'ah if one was sure that one sinned, and the same thing with the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin only brings a par chatat if an individual who made that sin would bring a chatat kevu'ah, but not if one would bring a korban oleh v'yored. The Mishnah in Masechet Horayot continues and says, "Aval chavin al aseh v'alo ta'aseh shebenida, u'mevin hasham talui al aseh v'alo ta'aseh shebenida." But the Sanhedrin will have to bring a korban par chatat if they have a mistaken ruling regarding an aseh and lo ta'aseh in the area of the law of nidah. And furthermore, one will have to bring an asham talui if one makes a mistake, or if not sure if he sinned regarding a law of an aseh and a law ta'aseh that has to do with nidah. Beka'amar, zohi misvat aseh shemikdash shen chayvin aleha. And now, back to the Mishnah, our Mishnah, that says, this is the law of aseh regarding impurity in the Bet HaMikdash, for which one, the Bet Sanhedrin, is not liable. And then our Mishnah continued and said, ve'ezohi misvat aseh shebenidah shechayvin aleha. And when Mishnah in Horayot says that there is a mitzvah for which the Sanhedrin is not liable in the area of nidah, what is that mitzvah aseh for which they are liable, rather, right? The Mishnah there said that there is a mitzvah that the Sanhedrin is liable to bring a korban chatat if they made a mistake in ruling. What is that mitzvah that said that they would be liable? And the answer is hayam mishamesh ima tehora v'amra lo nitmeti ufiresh miyad chayab mipnei sheyasiato hana'alo kebiato. If someone was having relations with a woman who is tehora, that's totally fine. But then during their act together, she said, "Oh, I just became a nida. I am tameh. Now, he's not. What he's supposed to do is wait until he's not aroused anymore, and then go out. That's the right thing to do. But if he leaves immediately while he's still aroused, then he is getting pleasure from that. Then he is liable. He's not supposed to do that because the going out gives pleasure like going in. If the Sanhedrin would make a mistake regarding this ruling and tell someone, oh, you should go out right away while still aroused, that's a mistaken ruling. They would have to bring a korban chatat. You know why? Par chatat. Because if an individual did that by mistake and didn't know, they thought, oh, she's nida, I better leave right away, and would make that sin on purpose, they would have to bring a chatat kivu'ah. And since they would have to bring chatat kivu'ah, if they did it made a mistake, therefore if the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, they also bring a par chatat. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.